So now, let's do a fast recap of how to create a variable and store data inside it in C++. So first, we need to tell the computer what type of data are we going to store depending on what type of variable are we going to use. For example, int is used to store numbers. But if we're going to store a group of characters like name of a person or a sentence, we're going to use a string. Then, we need to pick up a name for the data that we are going to store. And you can name it by whatever name you want. And finally, we store the data inside this variable using the equal sign followed by the value of data we want to store. And actually, I did tell you that you can name the variable by whatever name you want, but there are some rules you need to follow when naming a variable. For example, they should start with a letter or underscore. It cannot start with numbers or special characters. For example, int age is correct way of naming variable because age starts with a letter. Or this one is also considered as correct because it starts with underscore. But this one over here is considered as wrong way of naming variable because it starts with number. And this one also are considered as wrong because it starts with the hashtag, which is a special character. Then the second rule is that when naming a variable, it can contain letters, numbers, underscore in the middle or on the end of the name, but white space and special characters are not allowed. For example, H2 is correct because it doesn't contain white space or any special character, or didn't start with a number, but it ends up with a number. But that's fine, even if there's a number in the middle of the name, that's also considered as fine. And this one also considered as correct because it did start with a letter and also have an underscore in the middle, and that's fine. And if it didn't have any underscore in the middle of the name, also that's fine. But this one is considered as wrong because it's contained a special character which is a hashtag. Also this one is wrong because it have a white space. Now, the second rule is that when naming variables, variable name are case sensitive, which means variable with name is not the same as name, where n here is in uppercase. Let me show you in CodeBlock what does that mean. Like if we copy the line over here, now as you can see we have two variables. Let me change the value here to James. Now, if we try, we have two variables, and they have the same name, person2, person2. But if we try to run our program, it's going to throw an error, because we cannot have two variables with the same name. But now, if I change this one to uppercase, and try to run our program again, it will not throw any error anymore. Because now C++ treat these two variables as different because one of the letter it contains is in uppercase. Now, the third rule is that avoid using keyword in C++ as a name of your variables. And some example of keywords or words that you must not pick as the name of variables are those. But don't worry, you don't need to memorize those keywords. Like, for example, this, let me pick one like public, for example, and use it on an example in CodeBlock. Now, I told you that you don't need to memorize those keywords, because if we use it, for example, over here, as you can see, it turned out blue, because that's a keyword, and the CodeBlock will notify us that you are using a keyword by turning its color different from the usual color of variable name, as you can see over here. So this is a keyword and you cannot pick up a keyword because CodeBlock are going to throw an error when we are picking up a keyword as the name of our variable. And actually these keywords are not allowed to be used because C++ are already using them while we are coding. Like all of these words are used in C++ to do something. so we cannot use them to store data. So now let's create another variable. But this time, instead of storing a group of characters, we're going to store a number. And the type of variable that stores a number is the type int. So, if we type int, now our computer can know that we are trying to store a number. And we can name it whatever name we want. I'm going to name it h and store a number inside it using the equal sign. I'm going to store number 29. You can store whatever number you want. And then it with semicolon. Now let me create another type of variable that stores a single character. And the type of variable that stores a single character is the type char. I will name it single and store the letter I. And end with semicolon. And finally, the last type variable that we were discussing is the type bool, which stores only two types of value, true or false. And I'm going to name this value true, maybe. You can name it whatever name you want. Just follow the rule of naming variables. And I'm going to give the value true in this one. Then I'm going to create a second one and name it another name, because we can't have two variables with the same name. False. And give it the value false. As you might notice already, when we were storing a group of characters, we were surrounding the data with double quotation. But when we were storing a number, we are not doing that. When we're storing a number, we don't surround it by double quotation mark. And the same thing goes for the true or false value for the boolean, for the bool. But in single character, when we are trying to store a single character using a char variable, we are using only a single quotation. So now if we try to run our program, it will not throw any error, as you can see. And here when we run our program, it actually printed hello world. And that is because hello world is been followed after the code cout. And cout job is to display data to the screen. So if we, instead of printing hello world here, type the name of any of this data, of any of this variable, like person 1 or maybe person 2, without surrounding it with double quotation, just printing its name as it is, and then try to run our program, it will actually print what is inside this variable. As you can see over here, it doesn't print person 2, but it does print what is inside person 2. Because when we are not surrounding it with double quotation, the computer can know that we are trying to print a variable data. Which means, if we does surrounded by double quotation mark, it will print the word itself. It will not deal with it as a variable, as you can see. So be careful. And if we change it to another type, like maybe the name of type int, which is h, we name it h, and then try to run our program again, it will print what is inside h, which is number 29. But if we try to print the value of a bool variable, it will actually print either 1 for true or 0 for false. So for example, if we try to print this variable, and try to run our program, as you can see, it print 1, and the reason for that is because its value is true. So for true value, it print 1, but for false value, it will print 0. So instead, if we type this one and try to run our program, it will print 0 instead. And actually, let me get back here. And let me delete all this unnecessary code. And this one. Now, we have one variable over here, which is the variable person2. And person2 variable stored the name John. And then in the second line, we print what is inside the person2 variable, which is John. So this line of code, print John. But actually, the variable person2 that currently at this moment carry the value John can change. We can change the name inside it. And we can do that simply by typing the name of the variable we want to change its value, or we want to update it. So in this case, we want to update the value of person2 variable. So we're going to type its name, person2, and then use the equal sign, and then store a new value, Robert. I'm going to change the name to Robert instead. And now if we try to print the code, the variable data again of the person2 variable, you will notice that the value changed on the second print. Like this is the first cout, it was John. Because at this moment, the value of person2 was John. But at the second cout, it print Robert. And that is because before we print the value of person2, it first saw that we edit the value inside the person2, which is Robert. So that's why the value on the second cout changed. Now, that is about updating the value inside the variable. Now let us talk about the final topic of this tutorial. So, I told you before that int is responsible for storing number in C++, like number 12. But actually, it cannot store numbers with fraction, like 12.5. It can only store number that is a whole number, where if you try to print the data inside this variable number, what you will notice is that it will not store the fraction, as you can see over here. It only stores the whole number. So if we want to store a number with fraction, we need to use another type of variable that can store a number with fraction, and that variable is called double, where double is responsible for storing number with fraction, where if we try now to store 12.5 again and try to print this variable, which is called number 1, you will notice that it print the data successfully without any problem with the fraction. But you will tell yourself, why would we need to use the int type? Why not just use the double all the time? Well, the reason for that is because whenever we try to create a variable in C++, it takes some space in our memory. And the space double take in our memory is more compared to int. And we're trying to make the space of our program as less as possible so it can get the best performance. And here's a slide showing each variable how much space does it take in our memory. And as you can see over here, double take more space compared to int. And the same thing goes for char compared to string, where string take more space compared to char. And that's why when we're trying to store a single character only, we use char, even though we can store it in a string type variable. And that's all for today's tutorial. Thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.